using Spotify.
A scout meeting on Monday.
So they opened up. My understanding was they opened up the parks, but it was only to existing. Did you already have existing reservations, or are they now opening it up to everyone? Okay. I'll retweet. See if I can get.
In your comment yesterday, I hadn't seen anyone else mention anything. It happens.
Yeah, I was like, it's not on Wednesdays. Not on the first Wednesday. It's like. Well, there's that in between state. I either have long hair or I have a buzz cut, because anything in between, I don't have a hairstyle. You know.
I'm actually
Yeah.
well overdue mine.
Yeah, my wife said I have no choice now that I have stickers. This is my permanent hair. Yeah, that was crazy. I don't even understand what that is, but that might be a good subject too if you've been doing the research there. I saw that several of the folks on the DMs were going to be digging into the June 9th thing, the Google and stuff. I absolutely loved that we had. I mean, the folks from the DMs. You had Lip Moose saying her team's going to switch investigation from whatever Russian actors they were to this real quick, and forward to it. Um,
I do not have anything at the moment.
Sounds like my nightly Zoom bombers. Oh, you're like less intelligible than C-3PO. I mean R2-D2. All right. Yeah.
So is this targeting end users, or is this targeting like general security staff? Yeah. This is for end users so that they're generally aware of security. I would definitely toss in IoT, and maybe IoT isn't. Maybe give a brief overview of what IoT is, and then like list a couple of things out that most people wouldn't assume is an IoT device, like a Roku. Hey, Roku, do you patch your Roku? Yeah, well, that's an IoT device, etc., etc.
I don't. I was gonna say I would also maybe add uh, some of the resistances that people do that. It's not that they don't want to patch; it's that it pops up and says, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And they're busy. That's why they're engaged in the computer and say, "No, emulator, no, remind me later." And say, yes, it is very inconvenient, but imagine the inconvenience of the ransomware, of not being able to access ever your files. Um, that this is inconvenient. We understand that, but this is why it's
I tend not to, haven't really used any of the big public name ones. I think NordVPN got into trouble middle of last year, I think it was, for something they were doing, but I can't remember exactly what it was.
yes, the Fourth and Fifth Amendment aspects. And the on the comment of the apps that they add in that they do find malicious apps. These are applications that are intentionally malicious, doing things that are unbeknownst to the user, possibly even off guard. But that doesn't mean it's not a malicious app. It's not doing things that you don't understand. If you give it access, even if it's Zoom or one of the popular applications, if you're giving it access to certain things, it can't do those on your behalf.
So I'm not sure if it's just me, but the screen keeps flipping backwards and forwards between the slide and the slideshow presenter view.
I can't get the slideshow. I can see it on Periscope, but then I hear double sound. So I guess I can try to mute that one.
Doesn't seem to be. I'll let you know. If you want to, I was going to say, if you want a big name that got hit recently, I think, where is it, Barbara something from the Shark Tank show? Her company was hit probably about 4 months ago. I think her company appeared in the news for that exact thing.
Probably depend on context. Much of it's just odd. Mine phone gets a lot of calls. The person that owned it before signed up for everything possible and had very bad credit. So uh,
What's the difference between vishing and smishing? Ah.
my favorite on the callers to stall them is I just over and over. Who are you trying to reach? I have no idea who they're calling. And they'll go on for 5 minutes. Who are you trying to reach? Well, you can do this. No, who are you trying to reach? Yeah. It's-
I make a report. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that you like explaining that even if they are from what appears to be a legitimate source, if it includes a macro, I think it's worth unless it's something you work with constantly with a person of actually reaching out through out of channel.
Yeah, nobody has ever asked me whether or not this is a valid macro, and I wouldn't know that, and I think that's the reason why people aren't looking at my report is because I have macros in it, and they're not opening it up.
Not the magazine, some articles online. Which oh yeah, that was a fantastic article. Oh really? And he addressed that in the article. I mean, it was a long article, but he addressed that. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, he addressed that in the guilt and how that also weighed on his mental health. And yeah, because if there is a case, they will be able to make it. Still, even defense fund. Defense fund gives you the ability to fight justice. If there is a case, they're going to win, likely, unless you're. He was an infosec rock star for a while, but that's nothing in the greater community. Unless you're a Steen or something like that, you're always. Oh, I recall that from the article. I don't think he'd come back willingly though. but he no, because he did say he wanted to move to Los Angeles. You know. So.
Oh, I don't know.
idea. And and talk about the speed and always the benefits to them, not just the security of it. But if you still have something that's running the WP and weapon, and that means it's at least so many years old, and here's the speed advancements since then. Much faster. I have about 15 VLANs in my house. Yeah. Well, I have 8 on wireless. My wireless will only handle up to 8, so there's 8 dedicated there. One is a captive portal, so when we have guests come across, before I just used to give them a internet only VLAN access. But that means when they're leaving, or if they're syncing their device with their Apple Cloud or Google or whatever, that password's there now. So even though it's internet only, somebody could get that password, potentially access that network and poke around and try to gain further access because things happen. But so now it's a captive portal, so the access is only for 3 days. So I have that for the traveling bands that come through. And then I have a guest network that is for the guests that regularly come. They can all have that password. It is internet only. Um, yeah. Oh yeah. 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 And then there's the ones for the IoT. There's ones for media streaming that I try to optimize with QoS that don't need to talk to anything. Then the IoT devices, separate ones there. I have one that I only do my work from, my day job from. I have one that I only do my side hustle on. And then there's the general all access, including printers and everything for the family. But it's also complex, and complexity is enough, but it's security. So I could easily be making mistakes, and a normal user is going to have a I'm making. With VLANs are not intuitive on consumer routers. Yep. The what is the WP quick button? What's that called? I never use
WPS.
it. WPS. Yeah. There's been so many uh, issues with that. It does make it easier to connect, but type in the string once a month or whatever you have to. Yeah, maybe include that as well. The Pi-hole is a dedicated blocker and through DNS here, but back in the applications as well, like the antivirus is maybe bringing up ad blockers in that part.
I mean, uBlock Origin.
Same here. Origin. I've been using it for years.
Yep.
Or Google.
Well, and did you see wasn't it eBay that's port scanning your machine? eBay, I'm pretty sure it was eBay. They noticed there was a bunch of stuff on Twitter last week where it is actually port scanning your machine, looking for OpenRDP, NC, whatever kinds of things from within the browser.
So take a look at the Darknet Diaries guy.
Jack Rysetter.
Jack, yeah. If you look at his Twitter feed, he posted a couple of articles about it last week. Basically, they're triggering JavaScript that will scan your local machine over a series of ports, looking for specific services. They're using it to do browser printing, basically, to figure.
Very wholesome. That's very wholesome. That's wonderful. Yeah, I actually did recently. I remember what project. Like I needed to find out. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, it has got. I didn't used to have any footprint all the old stuff of my in real life name. For some reason now, I guess it's a mandatory tree on the front of all the white papers from No Before. And so that quote's on all these white papers, which means people read these and now take that quote, and it's like Port of Los Angeles Harbor or something as on their security training has it. And I'm like, crap, and it wasn't even my quote. I mean, I specifically said when it was for the Art of Intrusion thing that this was Bruce Schneier. They attributed it to me. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think he did both. I know for sure he did the one that was amateurs hack systems, professionals hack people. And I think he also did the attacker only when he wants. But I mean, I doubt he ever remembered. Jerk. E- Even worse, in the military, when you got promoted, they posted the promotions every bulletin board in every building. It was all the people who voted on the base of that last promotion, and it had your name, social, rank, everybody's different time, different time.
Yep.
Hmm.
Property records, DM records. Although you go to the DMB and ask for the license plate.
Yep. County tax records, high school your graduation from high school. They have communities for that online a lot, and a lot of times colleges will keep track if you have any awards or anything like that. You can search on their sites too.
Yes, I am. I've been listening. Just been quiet.
Yeah. And then I was gonna say, of course, there's the one exception that all all hackers make, and that's they post every FCon. Yep. Well, you brought up the work badge thing. I've seen a lot of people have pictures of themselves that have their work badges showing, where you don't even have to go. Or even the company sites where they have any sort of social presence. Being aware that when you're at a retirement party for a colleague and everybody's wearing their badge, that's where I'm going to get. In fact, there was one where I was targeting, and I got the whole outline of the badge, but I couldn't tell because of the size whether it was last name first or first. You know, which way I could never make that out. I got the whole look and feel. Then I found on their website they had a social part of where all these people are taking pictures and sharing about the company, and they had a Halloween party, and somebody came as a giant badge. And so their face was poking out of the badge, and it's like, oh, it's first name, last name. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and their face came out, where the picture would be. So it was cute, but yeah, it's a great idea. Just don't.
I've seen a bunch of those for Androids as well. And normally it'd say, hey, you need to download this software, and it'll be a link to tell you to go download some crappy antivirus thing, which is really just a adware clickbot / crypto miner. Got all three of them in the package. Yeah. In the news again. He was in the news again recently, wasn't he? The hacker that did that. I think somebody. I think someone doxed the person that did the collection. Yeah. I think somebody doxed the person that did the collection. I think they had a falling out with each other, and somebody doxed him. You'll see it on similar to that in general phishing terms as well as Facebook messaging too. I've got one. I got so they'll go on and they'll create an identical profile and even take pictures from the person's profile and put them as so it looks exactly like them, and then they'll send you messages. So yes, so my dad actually got hit by it as well, and what ended up happening was they sent me a message saying he'd traveled somewhere and that he got stuck and he needed money to get out or needed money to taxi or for flight tickets or something like that. Can't remember the exact details. Yeah, they lost their passport and they needed money to get a new one issued, and they basically just used that. And because it's a picture of your dad. Oh my God, what's my dad doing? Or why has he got stuck in this country? Oh, I need to send him money. So yeah, that's what they ended up doing. Yeah, those super cheap iPhones, it's not worth the money. Yep.
Something I would add here, and I've known folks that have fallen to this is reshipping schemes too. They're scams, and someone is sending you an expensive item, say computer parts or jewelry or electronics, and they have you repackage them and reship them elsewhere. I've seen a lot of people fall for those too, especially right now where people are hard up for money, everyone's out of work. So a lot of times what they will do is advertise on, Craigslist or whatever, and people that are looking for work, that are desperate for work, looking around trying to find a job. What the organization will set up is, hey, we're going to have these items shipped, and what you will do is repackage them, take them to FedEx, and ship them out again. And it's a promise of easy money. And really, all they need people to do is do this for, if they say they're going to pay them monthly, you say do this for 1 month and we'll pay you X amount, and then they just never pay you. A lot of times, what I was seeing was people receiving stolen goods and reshipping them out, and then once they didn't get paid, they stopped doing it, and that was that. But they got free labor for a month, reshipping stolen goods.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, can you hear? I mean, it's a difficult topic. It's very difficult. You want to engender trust in them, completely monitor everything. You want them to have some autonomy and responsibility. You also want to be there for them, because they could easily be, whether it's cyberbullying or people who prey on children, adults who prey on children. That you really need to have an open discussion with your children on that. Yeah, I think you're going to get a better reaction of that than law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
two things that two things that popped into my head. One, I didn't see it. It may have been there, but I didn't see it when you were covering passwords. You were talking about OSINT and all of the things later, but choosing your security questions, answers, and how those OSINT fails can, you know, use to basically guess that your school mascot, your whatever. And maybe encouraging what I think a lot of us do is completely making up the answers and storing them in a password safe, so it has nothing to do with reality. Oh yeah. No, no. That's something I encourage everyone to do is, keep it in your password safe. And then when they challenge you on the computer, it's easy. You just copy and paste it in there. When you're dealing with an actual live customer service rep, it can be somewhat awkward when you say your mother's name was VRGN apostrophe, But I definitely recommend that because otherwise it is the weakest link. The other would say is when you were talking about cracked software is again bringing it back to benefit versus risk, and you're talking about where the uh, things were being distributed, bots were being distributed through that software. Is what is the price? Are you pirating something that's $50? What's the price of getting all your data back? You're in thousands. So really highlighting, yes, you're getting $50 free, but you're probably going to have to pay thousands. Yeah, one of my biggest break-ins was a very large uh, state agency, but they allowed the same thing to make your own question answer, and they did not have uh, a limit on attempts, and so it would be how many grandchildren do I have? I'm like one. Oh, four. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, too, a lot of those details are collected by data brokers and aggregators. So if that data broker or aggregator gets popped, there's all kinds of nice information that's in a profile, right? Mm-hmm.
So that does bring up a good thing. I don't remember if it was in your social media OSINT stuff, but app permissions and social media permissions. When that survey is a perfect example of one. What's your stripper name? And the permissions it asks for is ability to post as you, access to all your friends, all your living locations, and all that kind of stuff. Apps don't need that much locating information.
And say hi to Permit for us.
Yeah,
Do
in
not,
fact,
but you timed that perfectly because I have to jump off to get on another Zoom meeting. Yeah, right on the dot. Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking, I do have some other presentation I would like to give. In fact, I'm still getting used to Discord a little bit. If you would, just at least let me know if you can see my screen here in a moment. Okay, and then just to check, what all can you see at the moment? Just, oh. So this is part of me using Keynote here, trying to get used to how it works. Let's see, give that a shot here. Okay, can you see the well, I may have to figure this one out. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay. Had to actually switch over to the application this time. So you might have to bear with some of the presenter notes and stuff, but yeah, so I at least wanted to go over some buffer overflow stuff, and part of my own reasoning behind this particular talk is uh, I took the OSCP a couple years ago, and when I went and took the OSCP, I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with buffer overflows. This was probably my biggest weak spot going in, and it probably felt daunting to me. It just didn't feel like something I could really do. And then I started looking at it, and the more and more I even attempted it, the more and more I realized how simple this really was. And so I'm trying to use this as a way of showing others this is something that you can do as well. Try to make this something that, if you want to pursue, you can do it as well. Awesome. So yeah, I guess I've been doing penetration testing for about 5 years now, but do development work just on the side. So I do have, I've got my socials right here. My GitHub is not exactly active, but I am starting to do a few things on there right now. Most notably, I'm also trying to learn Go, and on that front, probably the easiest way for me to really learn something is to actually do something like this presentation, is to document it thoroughly and just make a project out of it. And so if you want to see some of the stuff that I'm doing there, especially in the terms of documenting Go as I go, then that's the perfect place to go check it out. But on the buffer overflow side of things, when doing buffer overflows, there's just a few steps that you want to take as you go through this. And you can see here, it starts with fuzzing, controlling the IP register, locating space for your shellcode, trying to identify bad characters, redirecting the flow of execution, and then in the end, you want to get shell. And so we'll go through all of these, but first and foremost, let's at least discuss some of the background behind the buffer overflows. So for those that may not be very familiar with programming, there's maybe a few different ways that you can usually order information. And there's something called a stack, there's something called a queue. But your system, it runs on something called a stack, which is a last in, first out data structure. You can very well think of this like a stack of plates at a buffet line, where they come over, they stack up a bunch of plates, and the plate that was on the bottom is going to be the last one that comes out. You push new plates on top, you pop ones off, and so that's how your computer's memory works. So the stack is going to consist of these logical frames that, when they are pushed onto your stack, it's going to contain information such as the parameters to a function, the function's local variables. It's going to start containing whatever data is necessary to even recover to get you back to your previous frame, wherever your function was being called from. And so this is happening every single time you do a function call. So probably a better visual of this is actually this snippet of code where you're just taking a simple C++ program. And you can assume that this ellipsis right here is probably your terminal window. And when you launch your C++ application, int main is going to be the function that gets called. So it is first on your stack. You start to have all these different variables, and then right here, C is equal to whatever the add function gives it, which means you have to do a function call. When you do this function call, this new row gets added on, and it gets its own local variables added to it. It has its own stack buffer, return address, and so on. And this the return address in particular is so that when you say, okay, well, you send me A and B, which gets interpreted as X and Y respectively, it then stores the summation of that as Z and returns that to wherever it was called. So it takes that return address and sends it right back here to C. And of course, when your main is completely done, it returns hopefully a 0, 0. Typically means that your program ended normally. So hopefully, if you are in a Linux bash terminal, if you echo $? It will tell you how your program ended, whether it ended normally or otherwise, by looking at exactly the error code. And this is where it gets that code. So in this case, the add function returns to this line in main, and main returns to terminal. And every time that you return, you're popping each row off of your stack. So that's at least the normal flow of how things work, but how does the actual exploit work? And the exploit has to deal with your stack buffer right here, and this kind of depends on your architecture, whether you're little endian, big endian, and so on and so forth. This can definitely vary, but this is the concept, where if you have a stack buffer, the overflow direction is working its way up. So all of your data that you keep filling your buffer with is just getting pushed further and further onto the stack. So the more and more that you push onto your stack, the taller this grows, and eventually it might grow over into your return address and then over into the upper stack frame. So in this case, we overflowed it. We were able to overflow the stack buffer and essentially continue past the return address with whatever our buffer happens to contain. And then our return address becomes whatever we overflowed, which is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So really easy to fill that buffer with only 4 little bytes, and we'll see that here in a moment. So just to give you a quick overview of registers. There's this collection of registers off to the right-hand side, but we're really only going to focus on a couple here, the ESP register and the EIP. And so the ESP is your extended stack pointer. So we just saw the stack. The stack is where all of your function calls are happening. It's where data is being stored, and this is pointing to that location. The EIP is your extended instruction pointer. So as your program is trying to flow, it has to be able to do return statements or jump instructions and call instructions. And so in particular, like what we saw a moment ago in the example code, when the add function wanted to return back to main, it had to hit a return statement, and the return statement gave it an address that it needed to return back to. So this is basically saying, once you're done with this function, here's the next set of instructions here's the address of the next set of instructions that you need to start executing afterwards. That is a little off, and by all means, also, if anyone does have questions, absolutely stop me. We can go through this. I don't mind, dumb questions, any of them. I mean, obviously, that's exactly why I made this, is because I was there myself. So, well, so in fact, I like that note because this is probably a very good way of demonstrating it. Very good segue into this. So over in this top corner, you've got your registers. In the bottom corner, you have your stack, your memory, and all of your instructions. And so for anyone that's not familiar, this is Ollie Debugger that we're showing here. And let's see if I can't make this any bigger, just for sake of visibility. Can't figure it out. But the idea behind this is your ESP. Here we go. ESP here is pointing to an address called 0022F4F8. And if you look down here at your stack, that's actually the very top of your stack, which, of course, you can start to see it has various stuff related to your function that is currently going on stored right here. And if you look at the EIP, the 778F and such, this is the next instruction that it's going to execute. So what this is saying to us is the ESP is looking at essentially the data that is in your stack at the moment. It's pointing to that location on the stack, where EIP is just simply what's the next thing that it needs to do, even within the data within the stack. How is it needing to treat that, and the instruction sets that it points to is where it's going to figure that out. I don't know if that maybe helps, or if it kind of muddies things up a little bit. Okay, awesome, and we'll go into it a little bit more later as well. But seeing as how we are about to get into the meat of it, just want to make sure, does the background on this make sense? Anyone else have any questions at all? All right. Well, yeah, so this is actually a Vuln Hub exercise that I'm going to walk through today called BrainPan. And it's a very good exercise. I'll leave it up another second if you want to jot that down, but it's a very good exercise to just get some exposure to very basic buffer overflow attacks, which in terms of the OSCP, this is probably it's a good exercise to get you some of the exposure that you would need for those steps. It's probably enough to make sense of it all. So in particular, we're going to be running a Windows 7 instance 32-bit architecture to run this exercise. And when you run the VulnHub image, you just browse over to this website, or you essentially the URL that represents that VM on port 10,000/bin, download the exe, and from there you can start playing with it yourself. So if you start the application up normally, then you see that it is just going to open up port 9,999, and it's just waiting for a connection. So we use Netcat to connect over to that box on that port, and we get back a prompt saying, enter your password. We enter a password, and we see access denied. Well, what does it look like on the application side? we see that we got a reply called brainpan as the password, and it copied 9 bytes to the buffer. Not much spectacular going on here. So let's start the fuzzing process. To kind of get ourselves prepped for fuzzing, we're going to stop the application where it is. So stop the normal run of the application, and instead, we're going to open up the debugger. The debugger, it needs to be ran with administrative privileges, and you would just simply go to File, Open, find the exe, and open it up. This particular scenario does not require any arguments. The debugger itself is going to initially start the application in a paused state. And so in order to actually start things up, all you have to do is hit the little play button, and next thing you know, it's going to look like it did before. You're going to see the application pop up, it binds to that port, and it's waiting for connect. So we're going to use Python in this case to start writing our fuzzer. And this fuzzer, its overall goal is to figure out at what point does the application crash. So we're going to start by sending it 100 characters. In particular, we're going to send it the letter A, and the size will increase by 100 characters each time that we iterate through our loop. So just to better show that in the code sense, so we'll start with 100. The x/x41 is representing the hexadecimal version of a capital A, and so this is what it would be in ASCII code, is 41. When we start our while loop, we're going to take the A, multiply it by 100, essentially create a buffer over 100 days, send that to the server that's listening on port 999, and then as long as everything works, we will increment our account by 100 and start all over. So what this looks like when you actually execute the code is 100, 200, 300, all the way down to 800. But when you try and run 800, you see that you have an error. In particular, the connection was refused. That's because at 700, we crashed the program. And so 800 is now not able to establish that connection. So now that we've fuzzed the application, let's at least go analyze what we did and get that better idea of what's going on with EIP and ESP. So, in fact, even kind of behind the yellow circle here, you can kind of see EDX, which is all A's. But in particular, again, focusing on ESP, it is also all A's. And then your EIP is 41414141, which also represents A's in the hexadecimal sense. So when you look at ESP, this address points to the top of your stack, which, of course, if you also look at 0022F930, is pointing to this section of your memory. And this is not a default view, I should also add. By default, your memory is usually going to be displayed in 8-byte rows, but I like to do 16-byte rows just for the visibility of it all. Not to mention there's not much else really going on the right side, so you might as well use the extra space. So in this case, we've got the we can see that we've essentially overflowed our EIP register, which means we can start to control where we're pointing to in our instruction set. So we'll play with this a little bit more as we go. Also do take note at the bottom right corner that when the program crashed, it went back into a pause state. So for those of you, again, familiar with programming, if you ever entered a breakpoint into your code while you're debugging it, this is going to be essentially like that breakpoint where this is when the code crashed. This is when it broke. This is the snapshot of how everything looked at that exact. So let's start to actually control the EIP register. We'll use the Metasploit pattern creation tool. And what this is doing for us In particular, you can see we gave it an argument of -L7. We want it to provide us with 700 characters that are uniquely put together. They're done in such a way that when we execute this, we can query for the whatever part of that string that comes out in the EIP register. We can query for that unique set within this, and it will tell us exactly where the code is breaking. So what this is going to look like when we take that code, or rather I should say string, when we take the string from Metasploit's pattern creation tool and stick it into our code here as a junk buffer, we send that buffer to our code or to the debugger while it runs the application. And this time when we do it, we see that it gets back 35724134. So that is now EIP. So kind of like we said a moment ago, now that we know what the EIP is being overridden to, we want to take that and add it to a query using the pattern offset tool. And again, we want to specify that this original string length was 700. And so in a string of 700 characters created by the offset tool, that pattern comes up at offset position 524. So now that we know that, we can update our code. We want to inject 524 A's, 4 B's, and then we're originally playing with 700. So let's take the difference of 700 minus the 524 A's and the 4 B's, and let's make that many C's. We'll fill our buffer up with all of that content, send it over, and when we run this updated code, what we'll see is we've now perfectly found where EIP is being overridden because EIP is 4 bytes large. We only gave it 4 bytes of B. So EDX is now all of the A's that we filled it with. That's what it was expecting. It was 524 characters, no more, no less. But then when we went beyond what it expected, we overwrote EIP, and everything else was supposed to be C's, which now you can see is filling up our stack per the ESP pointer. So it's filling up our stack down here, which fills up all these memory addresses here. It's all essentially the same reference. So now that we've at least figured out how to control EIP and all the offsets and such, let's start finding some space for shellcode, because in particular, shellcode actually needs, in order to actually get a successful reverse connection back, it needs about 400 bytes of space to play with. But if you take those numbers that we played with a moment ago, in fact, we'll go back up just to see it. If you take our overall 700 bytes that we were playing with already, and we were saying that our offset is already at 524 characters in, and then we still have to overwrite EIP, that only leaves us with 172 bytes to play with. So, in essence, we need more space. So, in this particular instance, I just went ahead and I tried to increase the amount of C's that I'm injecting over into it. And when we do that and analyze the crash, we can see in this particular area of code in the memory section that it successfully overrode with 500 C's now on top of the original 172 that we had in there before. So again, just want to take a quick pause before going much further. Does anyone have any questions on anything thus far? All right. So on the bad character note, for anyone that may not have gotten the handle reference, my handle being Null Terminator, this makes me a bit of a bad character, but first name also being Brad, so I'm a Brad character. Yeah, dad joke for the day. But what we can see here, in essence, these bad characters, these are characters that may not properly be interpreted by the application. So what we can say is if the application itself is maybe anticipating some type of input and it does data manipulation on that input, then if we include those characters as part of our shellcode, the shellcode may not operate as expected. Now, on a similar note, the null terminator is always a bad character, and that's because string to an application, if that string contains a null terminator, the program will assume that's where your string ends when it starts to interpret that data. So, in essence, if there is a null terminator in your shellcode will not work. So, knowing this, we want to fill up our buffer now with a ton of bad characters. We give it literally everything that we can besides the null terminator. And when we take this, run the script, we get this back. Now, this looks kind of messy. You can kind of thumb your way through it and see that on the first row you have all zeros on the first place, except at the end where it's a 1. Otherwise, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to the end, and it's all hex-based. So you can kind of get that pattern match going, and you can figure out where do these characters maybe not align. Like, if all of a sudden right here, instead of a 23, I saw a 0, 1, that would indicate to me I need to pull that character out. That is a bad character in this instance. So in this particular run that we're demonstrating here, there were no bad characters because every single character came through as expected. And there are other tools to actually automate this for you. I want to say, what was it? IDA Pro. IDA Pro is the tool that they have you use in a lot of, I guess, professional spaces. And there's a tool, and I swear I can't, it's on the tip of my tongue. Mana, that's what it is. You can use Mana as a plugin to IDA Pro to analyze this for you. And I'm sure there's others, but it makes it much easier when you have a program spit out that error or the bad characters that did not come through as expected than it is to thumb through this yourself. So now that we know this much, let's start redirecting the flow of execution. So before we actually do redirect the flow of execution, there's a few things that we need to identify. So is this program using any DLLs that are vulnerable? Is the exe itself vulnerable? And what we're trying to look for when we say vulnerable is, ever since Windows XP, operating systems have started to include these memory protections. There's SEH, there's DEP, and so on and so forth. And so we want to find the weakest link. And in this particular case, when we pull up the safe SEH module scanner and Ollie debugger, what we have found is the exe itself, BrainPan, does not have any memory protections in place. So as a result, any code that resides within it can be affected by what we're trying to do. So part of what we did within the actual BrainPan exe is we looked for a jump ESP instruction. And you might ask, well, why is the jump ESP important? Well, if we can control EIP, then we can point to the address that the jump ESP instruction is located at. And ESP, if you remember, in fact, see if we can't find a screenshot again, but ESP is pointing to your memory that you just overflowed. So if we can store shellcode in that overflow space, and we can point to a jump ESP location that then executes our shellcode, we can start to get actual execution back on our side. So in terms of what this might look like, that memory address and sorry for bouncing around a little bit here, but the jump ESP memory address is located, that instruction is located at 311712F3. So we take that address and we have to flip the bytes around because we're using the little endian format. So it now becomes F3121731, all with the hex representation in front of it, the /x. So again, we take 524 A's, we take our EIP, which is now pointing to that jump ESP location, and we fill up the remainder with C's. And when we send that over, what we see, if we set a breakpoint at that particular instruction, is we are now successfully able to hit that instruction via the overflow. So now that we've got all this, we can go ahead and get a shell. And in this case, we'll use NSF Venom, and we'll point it to Kali on port 1234. We'll use the C programming language, and our encoder is going to be the Shikata Ganai. And of course, we need to eliminate any bad characters, but the only one we caught this time around was the null terminator. So we go ahead and we create our shell code, and you can see it pops. It presents you with a bunch of characters in hexadecimal format. So we just want to copy out its buffer, and we want to take that over into our Python code and put that right here into our buffer. So this is creating that Metasploit reverse TCP connection back to our host on 1234 port. And so one thing that we will do is we'll, in this case, add NOOPS, or what's referenced to as a NOP slide. And so as we walk through this, you'll see that we have 524 A's, we have that jump ESP instruction location, and then we insert NOPS, which are no operation instructions. The reason we want to start inserting no operation instructions is because in case the program itself wants to start adding stuff to our string or doing some type of manipulation to our string, then we want to make sure that it overrides a bunch of garbage data, a bunch of NOPs that do nothing. However, once the NOP slide is done, it will go ahead and slide right into our shellcode. And so what we see in this case is we start up our netcat listener, we run this code that's off to the right, and in the end, you can see from Kali running our listener, we now have a connection back from Windows where we're able to get access as the user running the application. So yeah, that basically is it. And for anyone that wants to dig into this a little bit more, these are some of the references that I use to build this out. And that also goes for a few other areas here. But yeah, overall, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, I can make it available. That's a good question because my Twitter is definitely very underutilized. But for, I suppose, anyone, at least in this chat, I can always drop it in the Discord. Otherwise, I will have to see about maybe even making a published repo on GitHub or something for this.
Yeah, sorry. I obviously don't know how to use Discord. I closed out of the lobby, so apologies there. Yeah, so, can you hear me? I feel like, okay, yeah, I don't know. The connection was switching over. Yeah, I'm feeling all right. The arm, outside of the arm, I'm feeling good. I do have, like, I don't know, I'm probably gonna have to go to the doctor or something to get it checked out. But basically, the past few days, starting with Friday, I had the idea of, in the past I've talked about this thing called the protest of concept, where we work on, new technologies that are to assist in, different, hold on, if I can turn the camera around. I'm able to show some of this. I guess you can't turn the camera around, sorry. But the protesting concept, the whole idea is that, there's a lot of people who need pro-privacy technology, but and the infrastructure to be able to properly do their protests peacefully and however they need to protect their First Amendment rights. And I don't necessarily want to be out at every single protest that goes on, but I want people to be able to have the ability to do that. So it's been this ongoing thing where how can we make technology that helps in these exact scenarios that occurred? And so a couple of hours before the protest was to begin, I thought it would be a cool idea to see if I could do a proof of concept of what a streaming system would look like to cover this. And, adopting a lot of the same things that I use for DHA, but then applying it towards, directing a stream while also filming and reporting. I was like, why not, right? Like, that's kind of a fun challenge. So I pieced it all together where basically the way I was filming everything was I had one phone that was the camera, and that had an RTMP streamer, and from there it would stream the live video feed and audio to a server that I spun up, and that runs a compiled version of Nginx with the RTMP module. So then I configured the settings on Nginx to where you would be able to record everything that's streamed to the server locally. And the reason why I did this was so that no matter what happens to my phone, like say some terrible thing was occurring to me, the police were beating the shit out of me, they might destroy my phone, aka the evidence. So I was like, all right, if I have a live streaming app and it's going to YouTube, there's also privacy issues. I don't have control over if I'm giving personal information out when I'm being arrested or something like that. So what I started thinking about was like, how can I mitigate all of these things? And so from there, I had OBS set up on the normal DHA laptop that I use, but I was pulling the stream down from the RTMP server. And that allowed me to then remotely control on another phone what was going on with OBS. So the balance there is that I have an offsite backup of everything I'm recording, but then I also have control over what gets streamed out to the public. This way, it could look a little bit more professional, and then also, provide me that necessary security. So, in instances in which I had to take this stream offline, which I'll get to, it was really handy that I could just press a button on one phone and keep the stream active, so that if anything happened to me, it would be recorded and I could use that for legal defense later. So that was the whole concept of that, and I wanted to try it out. Now, I didn't expect Friday to go down like it did, so I was kind of underprepared for it when it came to the riot side of it at nighttime. But during the day, I was able to kind of play with it a little bit, And on the second day, on Saturday, I was able to adjust the settings and make it more optimized. But it was really designed to just kind of play around with this concept. I had no idea that when I would start streaming this shit, that it would end up being one of the only resources that people had to see what the fuck was happening. I mean, I just assumed that the media would be there on the front lines recording all this stuff, but that just wasn't what was occurring. And I know why, because it fucking sucks being on the front line of a goddamn riot and getting tear gassed and sprayed in the face with mace and all of the shit that I went through. But yeah, so it was really crazy. So when we start on Friday, I'm over at Dallas PD headquarters, and it's a protest. There's people saying a bunch of shit, people standing around with signs, typical thing that you would expect. There was no violence, nothing like that. There was no looting, there was no spray painting, there was nothing going on at that point. And then there was a march, and the march was interesting. You had cops obviously directing where you could go, and there was even a drone flying overhead, and I'm not sure who that belonged to. I assumed it was the police. So luckily, I came prepared with a 100-watt green laser to shine at the drone. That was a lot of fun. But then we got to a certain point in the march where you're not seeing police in their normal uniform anymore. It's now riot gear. And it's like someone didn't give me the message this shit was about to go down, but it ended up, being pretty confrontational for a while. And I had this whole drama going on with the guy who was assisting me. Hey, we just happened to run into his girl with a bunch of other guys, and she's been ignoring him. So when we run into this, he's just emotionally distraught. And so he gets out of the situation. So I was just by myself. And so there was a certain point I decided to go back to my place, and I ended my YouTube stream. And I told him that, you're devastated, whatever. You're going to get over this by the end of the night. So what we're going to do is you're going to come back here by 10:30, and we're going to have some beers, and you're going to forget about this girl by the end of the night. Well, when he shows up, he, enjoys a completely CBD-only joint, and is quite fucked up to where it was like 5 minutes for him to make a move on Connect 4 when we were playing. And then we hear noise outside, don't think too much about it, and then you just start hearing psh, psh, psh. And then that's when it becomes clear that there is some shit going on outside. And my instinct is, I got to be out there seeing what's going on. And so I didn't even want to give myself time to set up the YouTube stream, any of that. I was just going to go on Periscope. And so when I got to the base of the elevator and stepped out and turned to walk outside the door, a brick goes through the window. And I can't express to you how insane it was to just be like, you're mentally, like your adrenaline is pumping, you're going down this elevator, and you're about to go into an unknown scenario, and you're still pumping yourself up, and you step outside, and then you just don't even get like that entry into it. You're just thrown into glass flying at you, and you're like, oh, okay. So this is what we're doing now. So I go out the other side, and I make my way on Commerce, and I am just seeing Neiman Marcus being looted. And you have a guy, and they're throwing rocks at the building that I live in, and so I'm just filming this happening. I can't obviously stop it. Some guys walking around with a machete. Shit was wild. And it just kept going from there. And the student and I followed the crowd, and I was streaming for some time, and one of the most powerful things I've seen out of all of this, and I fucking hate Periscope because of this, that the audio is so shitty that you can't hear what I witnessed, and I hate myself for not taking the 5 minutes to have set up the YouTube stream, because it was probably one of the most powerful things I've seen the whole time, and it was a couple of people at the end of this main group that I've been following that's been doing all of this, smashing shit around. There's like a whole like 20 cop cars at the tail end of this group. And I was thinking internally, like, why are the cops just letting this happen? Like, they obviously have 20 cop cars. Like, what is even going on right now? And then at the tail end of the group, everyone's kind of moving forward, but I see this group that are all by themselves, and the cops are coming up, and I'm the only white guy there, so I figure, and no one else had their phones out recording, so I felt like I should probably come over here and see what's happening. And I see these two people in front of this entire police force that's following these people, standing up and saying, like, this guy apparently got hit with a gun, and, they were confronting the cops. And, I'm walking up on this, so I don't have the full context. But I just come into this moment where they're yelling in the cop's face, telling them to back down. And then they did. And it was like, wait, what? I don't even understand what's happening right now. And then as these group of people keep walking with the rest of the group who are maybe a block down at this point, the cops are all going back and getting in their cars. And so I start going to where the cops are, and I'm just seeing all of them make jokes. They're laughing around, like, almost as if this is the shit that they've been waiting for, And I'm just like, God, why couldn't have had good audio of this? Because this would have been such an important part of the whole story that was unfolding, Right. Yeah, and real quick, I know it's probably reversed, but this is outside of Neiman Marcus, and it's still like this, where you have Now You See Us, fuck 12, fuck the police, stop killing us. And on Friday, this was, obviously looted and smashed to shit, and then they boarded it up. And Saturday, the footage that was covered in WFAA with the guy who got shot in the face with the rubber bullet, that happened like right here at this intersection. And so you can see where all of this was boarded up and there wasn't graffiti. All of this graffiti occurred on Saturday night when they came back through here. Just wanted to show that.
But for those who don't know, he brings up the individual who was shot in the face with the rubber bullet. WFAA picked up his feed. They only had their overhead with the chopper and saw it went down from the 500-foot level or whatever. But it was Whiskey's feed that they used on the ground.
Yeah, do you have any interactions with the National Guard?
Yes. I didn't have direct interactions. I was just in the crossfire of all of the shit. So Saturday night, over by the Pacific Avenue DART station, the intersection of Elm and Pearl is where the police were posted up, and then the National Guard came in to go after a group there. Now, the National Guard was going after the violent people. There's this big parking lot there where a lot of people were just trying to leave, but we were all in this parking lot. Now, I felt I was safe because I had a shitload of cover, but in reality, I was slowly being surrounded, and they were firing the pepper pepper spray paintballs. And that shit was just bananas. Like, I got spotlighted. You can see it in the video where the police are literally pointing the spotlight at me. And it's just like, I can't even see what the fuck's going on. So in that whole National Guard scenario, I was noping out and then tripped on a curb and dislocated my arm. So that was my National Guard fun. And then on Monday, it appeared to me that may have been, I don't know, it's hard to tell. Like, I think that was probably Sheriff's Department, actually. The National Guard for sure was out because it was daylight and I could actually, figure out what was happening. Daylight and Monday outside of the protest, outside the courthouse, before we all went on the bridge, that was National Guard, Sheriff's Office, and Dallas Police that were all involved in that. And also FBI was on the bridge as well. So I'm so fucking glad I got off that bridge.
How far? How?
Yeah, that whole.
That.
So this is how that whole little thing happened, right? So I jump off the side, I run under a column so that the floodlights can't, shine on me, and then I wait for a while for all the other people who were escaping to like go get caught essentially while I sat there and just bugged out for a bit, and then when I felt like I had a chance, I ran across the field and then hid behind some concrete blocks. I have no idea why they were out there, but hid over there for a bit and then ended up hopping a fence. At this point, I had taken off my mask so that I would look like just a normal white guy walking home, and had a buddy because this is right on the edge of the curfew line. So I had to figure out someone who could pick me up that was outside of the curfew line because there was no transportation options. And I had a buddy who picked me up. Luckily, he drives a Prius, so it's even better for us. And then I was able to go through the 2 checkpoints to get in town with, I have to show proof of residence, by the way. So I have to show the fucking police my water bill to go home, right? It's insane. But they wouldn't let us go through the 3rd checkpoint, so I had to walk the rest of the way home. But I was able to get out of that really fucked up situation. And and my main fear was that because my arm is still pretty injured, I can't really move it that much. And so I knew that if they handcuffed me, it was going to probably fuck it up way more. And I would have been in cuffs for 4 hours at a minimum. So. Yeah, sure thing. It just depends. Like if it's a protest that is not going to be mobile, because right now you're pretty limited with what you can even do with protesting, with the curfews and shit like that. Like if I felt it was necessary to be back out there, if I felt like it was going to be scenarios in which the media may not properly cover it, then I'm definitely going to go out there. But at this point, unless there's bigger ones this weekend, I'll probably go and cover some of that. But really, what I'm trying to focus on right now is due to the outpour of support that I got from all over the world. It's insane what my DMs have been like, and I have legal assistance. I have all of these different people who have different skill sets that want to help in some way, and so I'm currently trying to formally make a press organization so that we can have real credentials from a journalist union, also from independent media resources, and have multiple people use the same technology stack, but have multiple people out there and have more enhancements like geolocation on the stream so that you can know exactly where this camera is at, and different additions in that regard. And so that's what I'm kind of focusing right now, is getting all of this together and getting the resources. But that's where I intend to take this, so that we can have a real citizen journalism organization that's prepared for these types of scenarios.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to logistics, right? So that's something that I definitely want to have figured out, is where someone's job is monitoring scanners, someone's monitoring main media shit, and then also having an assistant there, which I've had 2 times now, that would be able to receive this information and kind of help, like that's what a producer's job is on these things. So because I used to work for a news station, I know how this shit's actually done, but I can do it on a absolutely zero budget. I was using my work phone for the filming.
I was just going to thank him again. The coverage of the protest in front of the courthouse, the speeches there, I would have not seen that anywhere else, and they shook me to my foundation.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of one of those things where the people who are across the street, the media, they're all there just recording this shit to clip up a 3-minute segment, and having the raw, complete story changes everything about how you interpret it versus how they edit it. And I think that is the most important part of what has gone on so far, is people having that opportunity I'm seeing the traffic come in from Reddit and comment threads where people are saying something that the media was saying that was a lie and referencing my video as the only source of truth. And for me, that is not the responsibility that I want to have. Yeah.
Thanks, Raymaker.
Thank you.